to WEBurlesque, the podcast. I am your host, Viktor Devonne, and today I am on the phone with a fabulous dancer, performer, burlesque parent, and political activist, MissAuroraBOOBrealis.
Hi.
I've only had a chance to know you for a short while, but if you were to explain, the essence of MissAuroraBOOBrealis to the uninitiated, how would you explain your flavor?
Ooh, what a exciting question. Explain my flavor. Sorry, my mind's all over the place, and all over the place in the sweet gutter. But as a performer, I am sensual and eclectic and versatile and powerful. I guess trying to explain my performance style, so, people will think, oh, you're a burlesque, you're a dancer, and so then they'll see me do a piece where I'm not focusing on, quote, dancing, and they're like, oh, I didn't know you did that too, and I'm like, yes, I am versatile. Or I'll do a piece that's more so I think that happens a lot. I like to create work that is engaging. So whether that is dance driven or more almost of a scene study like acting type, or political in nature, or gross or funny, like I do it all. Yeah.
You described yourself in a number of ways, but one of them you said was powerful. Is that something that you have felt for a long time, or is it something that has come out of performance?
I think I have. I've been performing burlesque about 12 years now, or almost 12 years, but I've considered myself a performer probably since the time I was 14. Okay. So I've been performing a long time, and I guess professionally performing post-college, but not even professionally, because I created my first performance year-long, that would be extreme, hour-long show before I even went to Sarah Lawrence, when it was all my poetry, and I had a friend who was a dancer, and then I had these three professional more adult musicians, probably in their late 20s, early 30s, and I was 18, and I put on this show in the Black Box Theater at the local coffee house that I worked at in my hometown in Saratoga. So, and that was, a professional performance. It was pre-college even. So yeah, I've been performing a long time, and I think I've always had a type of energy on stage. Obviously, at 44, I bring the power in a way that my 25-year-old self couldn't imagine. But even my younger self was powerful to the amount that I could be at that age,
Yeah, absolutely. I think we learn more about who we are as we go on. How, as someone who has been performing as long as you have in various media and in various capacities, what do you look at 14 or 25 or what have you and say, if I had just known then what I know now? And what have you learned from those ages that you still carry with you?
It's interesting. One of that I'll go in a slight tangent, but it'll get there. It'll get to your question. I think an outward spiral. So let's go on a journey. So from the time I was 14, there was this. I'm from upstate New York, Saratoga area, and which means as someone who was always interested in arts and culture, I grew up I went to school in a tiny little village outside of Saratoga. And so I, of course, wanted to, I hung out in Albany, Schenectady, Troy, a little bit, Saratoga, the quote-unquote bigger cities, because I was living in the country. And Albany, there was this venue that had 18 and over night, and so of course I had been going there since I was 14 because that's just how I rolled. And it's interesting now because the venue was QE2. TZ Roosevelt performs there. The fact that they're performing in this place, which I feel like is a precursor to me and my burlesque journey. And the reason I say that is because QE2 on Monday nights, they had this 18 and over night. And this, I'm talking about, and I started going there, I guess, in 89, right, when I was 14. And it was, at that time, DJ James, he was playing everything from 9 Inch Nails and Susie to Operation Ivy to Fishbone to Ministry to KMFDM, like all that stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And me and my friends would be our little punk rock chicks dancing in the cage with our combat boots and ripped up fishnets and tight mini skirts and like bustiers and whatever, right? And so it was very performative, little baby Aurora. And when I was 16, one of my friends who was a little bit older, she was dating the roadie of this band from Boston called Sleep Chamber. And they were going to perform in New York City at a Tuesday night communion at the Limelight, back when the Limelight was a Limelight.
Was the
right?
Limelight.
Was the Limelight, not a gym or whatever the hell it is now. Back in the day. Anyway, the communion was basically like the 18 and over night at the Limelight in New York City that was all like the goth and the industrial and all that stuff, right? So it was like, I'm sure the QE2's Monday night was patterned after communion, I'm sure. Anyway, the point being that the band from Sleep Chamber, their regular dancers from Boston, couldn't come down. So the roadie asked the girl, his girlfriend, who lived in Albany and was friends with all of us, do you have any friends that would come down to New York and dance for the band? So she reached out to all of us, and it was this epic journey. There was like 4 or 5 of us, and we drove down. This is the first time I ever went to New York City. And we got on stage. Of course, most of us, except for 2 of us, most of us were underage. It was supposed to be 18 and over, and we like talked our way in because we're like, we're supposed to be performing on stage. And the reason I tell this whole story is because a couple of years ago, one of my best friends who was performing with me that night, she had found footage and sent me the footage of us dancing like to one of the songs. And Victor, it was so cringy to watch because, and this is, I actually feel like the next time I teach, I don't know, maybe like a foundation class, or I haven't taught like a foundation burlesque class in a while, but the next time I do, or specifically I would love to teach a class for like younger new burlesque performers, because I would like to show this video, because it was me on stage being a quote unquote sexy dancer for this all male band, and it was cringy as hell to watch, because I was not embodied at all. I was an object. I was the fantasy of these men on stage, and they were using me as such, like the way that I was dancing next to them and and the way that they responded to me. And I was more clothed than I am in any particular burlesque gig now, right? But it was how I was not connected to my own body and how they perceived me. And this is like at the Limelight in front of like 500 people on stage. And so I think about, that was myself at 16 as this like little baby go-go dancer. And now I think of myself at 44 and can see how much I am empowered and sensual being, and my creativity and how I own my body and what I do with it. And so I can be mostly naked now on stage, much more so than I was then, but it's like all about my agency in such a powerful way. So that's the long story to go back to what I would, see the difference between the 16-year-old.
Yeah, I mean, do you think that teaching and working with other people has informed that, or do you think that you couldn't be a teacher until you already had that?
Both.
Okay.
I think I couldn't be. I mean, I've also, outside of burlesque, I've been a teaching artist for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I work with youth. I've taught like as young as 3-year-olds up through doing classes with seniors. So I've worked with like every age for the past 20 years, teaching fitness, teaching dance, poetry, theater, the combination of all of that, and then also teaching burlesque. So I think that definitely when I started out as a teaching artist right after college, the first few years were rough as hell. And I don't think I fully was in my own as a teacher. And so I think those really shaped me. But then I also became a stronger performer and just more embodied in myself and living more experiences, which then, of course, made me more embodied and da-da-da. And so that's why I think it's both.
Were you always sort of a mentor figure in like your groups of friends? Is that something that's come naturally to you?
Yeah, I think, in grad school, I created this, I went to a very alternative graduate school, Goddard College, and I did an MFA in interdisciplinary arts, which is a low residency model. Anyway, so instead of a thesis, we have these things called portfolios. And my portfolio was called, I'm like, wait, hold on, let me get the title. There's a specific title. Do I even have it right here? The like one copy that I printed out somewhere. Oh wait, no, that's not it. Sorry, I'm like looking on my bookshelf. I was like, it's somewhere, but I'm not going to take the time. Okay, let me see it. Here it is. The title is 5 Movements Towards Freedom, the Poetic Wanderings of Dawn's Mind. And
is that why you use that? Is that why you use Dawn's Mind on your Instagram?
Dawn's Mind is basically the name, the production, quote unquote, company I gave myself in college. So I as a performer in burlesque, because I'm also a performer outside of burlesque, and I recognize I have a luxury that some burlesque performers don't have, where I use my actual name, which is Dawn, as well as my stage name. And I recognize that, because I live in New York City and because of the life that I've created, I don't have to hide my burlesque self. And I know a lot of people that do. And so I don't take that lightly, that I can be interchangeable, and have, decided to. And my Instagram is just Dawn's Mind. And also because I didn't want to have multiple accounts because it's just too much work.
It's too much. You're diversified enough as it is.
Yeah, I'm like, I do too much. But, and I, even as a teaching artist, before the organizations I teach for, they know I do burlesque. And when I start a residency and I meet with the staff and the principal, whatever, I let them know that I'm a burlesque performer. And I also specifically make sure that they only call me Miss Dawn to the students, so that the students, because this is the era of social media, can't know my last name, so they don't search me, because I don't want them to find the students that I work with to find me on Instagram, because that's not appropriate. Anyway,
well, I find that true in most dance circles. Is that you're usually Miss first name. That's like a convention, isn't it, right? Yeah. Well, I was going to say, I've heard that from some folk. I spoke to Abby Fantastic about this recently, and of course there was what Lottie Ellington went through about a year and a half ago. That there is, and I don't think there's a coincidence that these are also women of color who have had these experiences, where they are working in the burlesque field, and that suddenly becomes an issue for the people that frankly burlesque is not for. And so they decide to insert themselves by saying, well, this does not appeal to my personal tastes, so I'm going to basically fuck with this person's money, which is one of the worst things to do to an artist, is to take away their stage and take away their, and also take away their financial backing, which for a lot of people is their day job. Yeah. So have you ever experienced concern with that? Or, since you are as open as you are.
Yeah, the first year I was doing burlesque, I was teaching more full-time at a place, and the principal knew, and she asked me, not to, like the first year I was doing burlesque, all the interviews that I did, I didn't give my legal name, and I also always wore wigs for the first, it was also because I was rocking like a mohawk and then a shaved head. So I always wore wigs in all photos of me for the first year, like 2007, 2008, was always wearing wigs and stuff. And it was really because of that job. And I, the principal respected what I did, but she knew, she was just like, just in terms of the school population and, blah, blah. So, but when I left that job, I was like, you know what? I'm going to be more free now. And that's when I really stopped wearing wigs and
just being a little bit more authentic.
Yeah. And, it's interesting, organization that I teach for now, they just the other week posted a blog on Facebook about, because they're highlighting their different teaching artists, about a residency that I just wrapped up, and even in the description they were like, and teaching artist Dawn, blah, blah, blah. And she's a interdisciplinary performing artist, she does burlesque, and I'm like, wow, they're even shouting out that I do burlesque and talking about me working with this junior high school. Okay, cool.
Yeah, because I guess it really does depend on what how often do we get asked what burlesque really is by people. Besides the fact that we can't all agree on one single thing, which is, fine, there's still a bit of a mystery behind it. Some people know that it's supposedly somehow sexy. Some people assume that that only one body type can do it, or some people assume that only one style. But since it is so many things, I think sometimes people have a difficult time grasping onto it, because there really hasn't been multiple examples that agree with each other in mainstream media in terms of burlesque. We have a general purpose of drag, so much in fact that we can get pretty individualized and all of that, but burlesque, it's still pretty undefined by mainstream America.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you started becoming a performer at 14. What was that performance type?
Poetry.
Okay.
And spoken word. That was really the first thing that I started, like so many poets, going to my local open mic and getting on the stage and starting to rock and read my poetry that, I was writing in my journals. That was keeping me sane.
Mm-hmm. What were some of the topics that you would be writing about?
The normal teenage
the teenage experience.
Yeah, the teenage experience of, I had this one poem called, I was always dramatic. I had this one poem called, this is funny and not funny, whatever. Mm-hmm. The story is funny. I had this one poem called Suicide Note, Take 31, and my grandfather's wife, I guess my step-grandmother, she was a social worker, and it was a poem that I had gotten published in my high school's literary magazine, and she had a copy of the literary magazine, and then she pulled my mom aside and was really concerned about me. She's like, I think Dawn is suicidal. She's written this poem. And I just had to explain to my mom, and she had to explain to her, the poem is not interesting if I say I'm kind of sort of sad and like the day sucked a little bit. Like
You have to be extreme.
I was a teenager. I was like goth and you know, I'm like, come on now. Yeah. So, you know, I wrote, it's funny, there was, I also grew up, another big influence in my life is my mom's a visual artist. She makes soft sculpture animals, and I grew up going to folk festivals with her where she always had booths and would sell them, and so I'd like help her at her booth and stuff. And then there was this, and then I'd be on staff for folk festivals when I was a teenager, and there was this festival where on the Thursday night before it opened to the public, they'd have an open mic for the for all the other volunteers.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely read, you know, I'm probably at least 16 by now, and my stuff is really risque. It's like really sexual and really like out there. And then and the next year I went back to the open mic at the festival, and they were like, yeah, Dawn, we can't have you read. Like, it was like they censored me because my stuff was...
This is too much.
They were like, it needs to be a little less R-rated. I'm like, that's what I write. That's my experience.
You've always been so provocative. Do you think that was the Prince influence?
Hell yeah. I mean, I was Prince for Halloween in 4th grade.
Wow.
So that's my first official drag.
Okay.
Yeah, I was 10, and sadly there are no pictures, and I really, really wish there were pictures because my mom made me a purple jacket. So 4th grade for me is the year Purple Rain came out.
Okay.
So I had tight white pants and a white ruffly shirt and black boots, and I penciled in a little mustache, and I had, you know, no chest in 4th grade, and I was, you know, I'm sure I was actually Prince's height in 4th grade because much taller now. And my hair was like the same Purple Rain style and the purple jacket, and I had a red rose and yeah, so that was my first drag king moment.
What was the response like?
Oh, it was great. I mean, I remember because 4th grade was the last year that I was going to school, elementary school in Schenectady. So basically there were other black people. And then from 5th grade on, I went from 5th grade till high school graduation. I went to Galway, and I graduated with 74 people. And there was me, and there were like 2 Korean kids who were adopted by white parents, and there was like my friend who was like half Filipino and half white, and me, and that was it. There was like 2 other black kids, but that were there for one who lasted a year and one who was there for a couple months. And of course, when he came in, like I was in 7th grade and he was in 9th, and the first day that he came in, people were like, oh, is that your brother? And I no. And they were like, oh, you should date him. I was like, oh. Yeah, that was...
But you have so much in common, this one thing that I can think of.
Yeah. But anyway, but when I was Prince for Halloween, it was well taken because, you know, city, Schenectady, other brown folks. Yeah.
How else I know to think of you is to think of Prince, because you've done entire Prince shows, and you have produced, and the first time I saw you on stage was doing a Prince act at the New York Burlesque Festival, and was he like your go-to icon? I think a lot of us, when we grow up, there's people that we like, but there's that one that we put up.
Yep.
Yeah. Was he always your number one?
Always. My best friend in elementary school, Jenny, introduced me to Prince in 82 maybe. Well, whenever 1999 came out, the double, and she had the double album, and we would just stare. We would just stare at the record sleeve, the one. You know, the one
I do.
Yeah,
that would have been 82, 83.
That had Prince, and he's lying naked underneath satin sheets, and the satin sheets are like half off his ass, and he's like lying on his chest, and he's like head is up, and he's just looking at you. Yeah.
Oh, I just Googled it to remind myself. Yes, it was the centerfold of the LP.
Yes.
You opened it up, and there he was in the center. I remember that. Yeah, my parents had 1999.
Yes.
On
that
vinyl.
Was my sexual awakening. That
right
picture
there.
Right there. Yep.
That told you everything you needed to know.
I mean, people who knew me back in high school and college, and then I haven't seen in a while, and I run back into them or I reconnect with them on Facebook or whatever. Nobody is at all shocked that I'm a burlesque performer. Like, that makes so much sense.
Well, you were,
of course.
Since you were mostly your first introduction to public art for folks' consumption was verbal, since it was poetry, so it was written in verbal. I think a lot of people are going to be surprised to hear that you weren't like a dancing kid, considering how movement oriented you are now.
Oh, well, I've always been. Oh, yeah. Oh, wait. Rewind. Not actually, my first public performance was way before 14. Thank you, Victor, for
no problem
reminding me of my life.
We're digging it up.
So when I was 5 or 6, there was, like I said, my mom. We went to all these folk festivals, and she had this friends who were in this band called the St. Regis String Band, and it was at this folk festival called Bear Mountain, and they were on stage, and somehow they got me to come up on stage. So I have been dancing my whole life, but I never had any quote-unquote formal training until I went to college. But I had been growing up at these folk festivals, contra dancing, square dancing, clogging, swing, Cajun, all of this social dancing, like my whole life. And so when I was 5, I was actually a really good clogger. And now I can only remember basic steps. I still love clogging, but I don't know any of the fancy stuff. But like at 5, I was actually pretty good. And so they called me up on stage, and I performed with them in front of like hundreds of people at this folk festival. So that actually is my first public performance. So, and it was dance. So there you go. Thank you for reminding me of that.
We've made difficult decisions.
And there are still more ahead of us.
2 people aren't enough to save the galaxy.
We need the toughest,
smartest,
deadliest allies.
We need you.
We need you to join us.
And listen to Reignite,
a certain point of view podcast about storytelling,
love,
and Mass Effect.
Join us every other Thursday as we fight for the fate of an entire galaxy.
You can find us everywhere you get your podcasts.
Or at certainpov.com/reignite.
We're counting on you.
We should go.
When did the burlesque start happening for you?
Well, I was doing burlesque years before I knew what burlesque was. And I say that because, so let's see, I'm trying to get my dates right. So I graduated high school, rewind. So there was the QE2 Dancing in the Cage, that thing, and then the going to the limelight and doing that.
Right, the go-go.
Whatever,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
All of that and da-da-da-da. And I always, my friends that were, girlfriends that were a couple years older, that were of age and whatever, a couple of them were strippers. And so I always, that was just something that was always in my presence. It wasn't some weirdo thing that only weirdos did. Well, I was the weirdo, and all my friends were the weirdos. So, that was just in my knowledge. So when I was 18, and then I had another friend who was stripping, and then another friend who was DJing at the same strip club, and they were always telling me about it. And then I took 2 years off between high school and college, and when I got into Sarah Lawrence, I was mostly on financial aid, but the amount that the family was supposed to contribute was impossible for my mom. As a single, she was an artist, single mom. It's not a possibility. So, and I wasn't living with her at this time. So, and I was waitressing, and then my friend who was working at this club in Albany, she was like, "You should come." And so in the spring of '94 is when I started stripping at a strip club, and, got really into, of course, Prince was I don't remember which Prince song, but of course my first set was Prince songs.
Lends itself well to the medium.
Yeah, yes, exactly. And so that's when I started stripping. And so I stripped on and off throughout college. And sophomore year, when I was at Sarah Lawrence, there was this show that would happen 4 or so times a year called Cabaret. It's Club Cabaret. And in October, for coming out month, as colleges everywhere love to celebrate, it had cross-dress cabaret. So my sophomore year, I created this piece, which I attribute as being my first burlesque piece. Of course, I have no idea what the term burlesque is, but this is at Sarah Lawrence College, which is, just north of here in Bronxville, and just half an hour north of the city. And this is in 95 or 96, which is, the same time that neo-burlesque is starting to pop off in places like New York City and the Bay Area and whatever, right? So I created this number where I start out in a suit in my 6-inch platform heels, right? And my hair is up, and I had 3 friends of mine sit and be extras, and I basically created a strip club, and I had different friends of mine be the different types of customers, and I was basically creating this satire of a strip club. And then I came out and I stripped out of the suit, and I had this, because it was cross-dress cabaret, and I had this one-piece teddy on and whatnot, and I was interacting with the different obnoxious customers and flirting with some of the nicer ones, which were my friends, and blah blah. So I realized that was totally a burlesque piece. That was a performance piece. I was stripping. It was performance art, and I was stripping. Hello, neo-burlesque. But I had no concept that was
right. No one was
genre.
saying, "Oh, by the way, that's what you're doing."
Yeah, and so fast forward to the late 90s. I graduated Sarah Lawrence in 98, and moving into the city, and I was still stripping on and off. While I was at Sarah Lawrence, I was stripping at this club in Yonkers for a while. And then, afterwards, I was trying a club every so often in the city or whatever. And one friend of mine was like, yo, you should go to the Blue Angel because it's woman run. Still had not heard the term burlesque, but they're like, you're not going to make, it's artsy. You're not going to make as much money as a regular strip club, but you get to do your own thing and it's artsy. Mm-hmm. And so I went one night and saw some really out there amazing acts, and I never ended up auditioning or whatever. But of course we know, if anyone knows your New York City burlesque history, that's where fucking one of the main spots that neo burlesque was popping off. But once again, I didn't know the term. Mm-hmm. I just, and also during the mid to late 90s when I would go home and work at my house club, one of my friends who was a dancer, she was telling me about Miss Exotic World and she wanted to go to it. This is when it was still on the goat farm, because she was like, yeah, I want to be able to work on this piece. So burlesque was all around me, but I didn't know the name and we weren't calling it that.
But you still were able to make your mark. And
I didn't so finally when I finally heard the term burlesque was maybe 2004, and and I went to somebody told me about it and went on a date to the Slipper Room, and no, that wasn't the first place. I went to, the first burlesque show I saw was not at the Slipper Room. The first burlesque show I saw was at the old knitting factory where Velocity Child was doing badass burlesque.
Yep.
And that was the first burlesque show I saw. And Darlinda blew my fucking mind. And I've told her this story 10 million times. Every year in the dressing room, I'm like, oh my God, Darlinda, do you know that I was so inspired by this piece? But it was such a great piece. And I was like, wow. When I saw this burlesque show, I was like, it's all the fun bits of stripping without the bad bits. It was the empowerment and the feeling sexy and enjoying and whatever, but not all the creepy ass customers and the annoying long hours and that stripping had. And because for me, I was never a great stripper, because modern day stripping is about the hustle. Mm-hmm. It's about getting the dances, getting the couch dances, the lap dances, getting dudes to buy you drinks. It's not about the performance. And for me, I was always about picking my 3 songs and having fabulous costumes. So and it's ironic to now know the history of stripping and burlesque and when they were the same thing and how they diverged and how I was doing burlesque when I was stripping. I find it very interesting. And so when I saw this badass burlesque show, I was so inspired, but I had just started grad school and I didn't have the focus or energy or time to get into burlesque. But after a month after I graduated grad school in February 2007, I started meeting with a group of women, and that we became, Brown Girls Burlesque, and we debuted on my birthday, October 12th, 2007.
Do you remember what you did?
Oh, yeah.
What your first...
Oh, yeah. Well, our first show was the Jimmy Experience. So it was the all Jimi Hendrix tracks. And I did Manic Depression. Little shout out to my former teenage self, maybe. And, I would love to go back. I don't know if I'm ready. I would love to recreate that piece with this skill and technique I have now, because, I was, I mean, people, of course, loved it, whatever, but, as 12 years in, I'm like, oh, I couldn't even watch the footage, But I would love to recreate that piece because it's such an incredible song. Maybe I'll do that in the next year. I don't know.
Well, then you eventually started your own. I guess it's sort of a political show in that it's called Compost Bin, and it's run as Brass, right? Brass is the parent company.
Yeah, so Brass, Brown Radical Ass Burlesque, is the troupe that myself, Exotic Other, and Sister Selva co-founded in 2015. And Exotic and Sister were also a part of BGB back in the day. And we moved on to found Brass, and we had been, in the early bit of Brass, we had been talking about really wanting to, do we want to get back into the monthly show game, right? And we had also been talking about having some sort of adult cabaret where people could really be political and bring different types of, but it was burlesque and more. It wasn't just a burlesque show. And then we got approached, a friend of someone's sister knew was involved in the opening of Star Bar, and they ran into each other on the beach or something, and they were talking about Star Bar, and Sister was talking about Brass, and they knew about us. And so it was just one of those beautiful moments where we ended up being the first regular performance, monthly performance at Star Bar once they opened. And so we've been there almost 2 years now. And
what is the show like? So if somebody were to say, come to my show, what is it?
It's a moment in time where you can feel free, you can feel inspired, you can feel challenged, you can feel like we are it's an autonomous zone for the evening where there's so much fuckery in the world, and we can come together and grieve and celebrate and let out our emotions and holler and all of these things. So we have burlesque, drag, music, comedy, poetry, and more. And we are, creating. And Sister and Exotic Other created this ritual that we do each month called the composting ritual, where we actually have a actual compost bin on stage, and we get things that the audience wants to compost, whether it's all the fuckery of the month, all the bullshit from the month, and people yell it out, or they write it down, and we throw it in the bin, and then we have this whole ritual to compost it. One of our taglines is we turn the bullshit into gold. So it's like this group cathartic moment, and really incredible top-notch performers from all over New York City in different disciplines. And it's a really wonderful night. And so super excited, because the next one in May, really excited about, is going to be, because May is, Asian Pacific Islander Month, and Asian Heritage Month. And so we are doing an all Asian cast, and I, as a non-Asian, as a Black performer, am not going to be performing. I'm stepping off stage this month. I'm going to be producing it. And because my two partners are Asian, and in February they did the same thing. I did an Afrofuturism show, and I booked an all Black cast, and they stepped off and didn't perform and were just supporting backstage. So I'm really excited as POC that we can work together and support each other and showcase each other in ways like that.
I mean, I have a feeling I know the answer to this already, but do you feel that stages for people of color are still not as numerous as they could be?
Oh, yeah, totally. I mean, it's wonderful that there is more, I mean, more in the absence of none. Yeah. It's still, but then you look at so many show flyers and whatever, and you're still one of my favorite, and by favorite I say that ironically, one of my favorite things to do is look at curtain call photos, and you'll have a cast of you'll have some gigantic cast of some big ass show, and I'm like, wow, okay, I see you. I see you. And then it's, and then of course it's very telling and to see the producers that are not POC and aware, because POC producers, okay, and there's more of us now, but then to see other producers like yourself and other producers that actually are consistently booking more than one POC is lovely and refreshing and needed, and more people need to recognize. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, especially you coming from a background that includes spoken word and includes representation of voice. The Black experience or the experience of someone of color in today's world, I think, is so necessary on stage. And there are some performers that, there are things that I've learned about my own uncomfortableness on stage when I am presented that kind of experience. One of the perfect examples is the first time I ever saw Essence Revealed's Black Lives Matter act. It was jolting and it was powerful, but it also it made me feel some kind of way. It made me feel like, oh God. And while white people have a history and a present day history of not handling mirrors held up to them well, right. we don't do well with that. We don't do great. Right. I think it's important to have that space, and I understand that Compost Bin and Brass particularly, it is a predominantly POC show. Is that true?
Yeah. So Brass is, Brown Radical Ass Burlesque. We do once in a while book a white performer who is, and I'm not even going to use the totally co-opted term woke, but like a white performer who is acknowledging and recognizing and actively working on all of the shit. You know what I mean? So every so often, so there are white performers that perform in Compost Bin, but not all the time.
But they go through a screening process.
Very intense screening process. So if you see them on the Compost Bin, they're pretty dope. Just saying.
What is some of your addition to the political nature of your show? Obviously, being a statuesque Black woman in charge of her agency, we discussed this a moment ago, being in charge of what you're doing on stage is already a political statement. So you having and embodying yourself. Do you have acts that are more overtly political other than just your presence?
Yes, definitely. Where to?
I would say one of the first ones that I ever saw of yours was your "Give Me One Reason" act, which is not inherently political on the surface. Until you get to the end, and then it basically then it's like the whoop. I don't even. It's not really even a gut punch. It's like a what? And I remember I saw that I think in Philadelphia the first time I saw that. And I appreciated it because it was such a cool turnaround. And I think sometimes, and I'm largely looking at white people, that we sort of tune out because we're not necessarily comfortable being addressed, or not being part of the narrative. Because again, I'd like to point out that not all these acts that we are seeing are for us. So sometimes we can tune out if we feel either called out or uninvited. And I appreciated the slickness of that act.
Yeah, I specifically really wanted to when I was making that act, I really wanted to make something exactly for those reasons, that so people, and by people I mean specifically white people, wouldn't be like, oh, here comes the angry black woman with the angry black woman piece. oh, okay, let me know when it's over. I wanted them to just, oh, she's just doing a sexy blues. Oh, ooh, she's in a red dress. Ooh, okay, yeah,
Uh-huh.
and get it that way. But I have a couple of different pieces over the years that I've made around dealing with issues of being mixed and looking at that identity. I have I've been really enjoying, I feel like more lately more, whatever. I've been enjoying, I think I've done this one at your show as well, the which is another switch at the end, the giving him something he can feel.
Yes,
which is also in red, ironically. I'm like, if I'm going to do a switch at the end, it's got to be red. No, I don't know. But I think I really, when I was younger, a lot of my first solo show that I created, actually my second show. Okay. My first solo show that I created in college called Confessions and Affirmations. It was brilliant for the 21-year-old artist I was, but it was very ranty and very, and this is what I think is wrong with the world, and fuck this, and da 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 da, and now I'm gonna dance and blah, that it was.
Yeah.
It was brilliant. It was great, but I've very much been enjoying, I think, the more that I experience of burlesque and learn and learning about, the traditions and how deep the traditions of satire in burlesque and how you can do that with, the wink and the smile and you can still go deep with something that is funny or sexy and then makes people think at the same time. So I've been really enjoying, and I think give them one reason and giving them something you can feel is in that tradition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's also it's a way to make it. It's a tweak, but it still is fun. it still has it's got a wink to it, but it also it puts clarity towards what the goal is. Those of you who have not seen those acts, do search out the MissAuroraBOOBrealis experience, because those are a lot of fun.
Thank you.
So have you had an opportunity to travel as a burlesque performer? Is that something that you've gotten involved in?
Yeah, I have not as much as I would like to, and I really want in the next year and a half to travel more. But I've so far, I've been to Austin a bunch, which is wonderful. The burlesque scene in Austin is really beautiful. Coco Electric has brought me down to headline a few shows down there, and so Austin is lovely. I think the first time I went down is she brought me down to headline the Texas Burlesque Festival in 2016, and then over the past 2 years after that, I went down maybe 3-4 other times and was doing shows with her, and that was to this day my one incredible festival headlining experience. And hey, festival producers, book me to headline your show, your festival, because it was dope and I want to do it more. But anyway, it was great. I've been out when I go to BurlieCon. I've been out and done Sugar Shack and done, which is, oh my God, the most amazing POC show in Seattle fucking ever. Miss Brickhouse and Cindy La Rosa produced this incredible POC show, and done that during the BurlieCon weekend. Also shows with Iva Handful, and and I've been to Boston, to Philly, different places. But I'm super, super excited. Thank you, because I haven't even announced this yet, and I think it's about time. So, announcing, I am going to be performing in Minneapolis. Wait, I got to get this is why I should have left my Facebook up, right? I'm let me get the exact title of the show that I'm going to be doing in Minneapolis in June. Super, super excited, because this will be my second time in Minneapolis, and the first time I went, I wasn't there for burlesque reasons. I was there for this Emerging Directors Institute, which was also, because I'm also a theater director, by the way. Another thing I do. But when I was there, I did not get the chance to go to Paisley Park. And I'm hella going to Paisley Park this time, and I cannot fucking wait. I'm yes. Obviously, with deep sadness and, but
reverence,
yes,
but still.
Yes, I'm going to Paisley Park.
One must pay homage, exactly.
Exactly. Okay, so the show is called Melanated Menagerie. Ooh. And it's a group in Minneapolis, a POC show, and they have raised money to bring a handful of really fabulous performers throughout 2019 from all over the country to headline their different shows. So I know at some point in the fall, I think they're bringing Jeez Louise. I think they're bringing Jet Noir. They're bringing me out in June for their Pride show. I'm super, super excited.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
So that's one of the, I know a couple of weeks ago, I posted on Facebook, vague booking. Hey, I've got some great news to announce in burlesque at some point.
Eventually.
So eventually, when I this past 2 weeks has been insane. I did 3 shows last week, and I have 2 more this week. And I am a parent. I have a 7-year-old, and I normally don't do that many shows so close together. And, so it's been a lot, and I got 2 more shows, and then I'm does it slow down? No, because the May show, Compost Bin, I'm not performing in, but I'm producing, and then
You're still involved. There's still all the work that goes in. Yeah,
exactly.
Trust me, I get it.
And then I'm producing May 24th. That's the night I got for the Coney Island Burlesque on the Beach series.
Oh, very nice.
And I'm super excited because,
is that your first time producing at Coney?
No, we Brass had produced there before, and we had done BGB back in the day, had done stuff. So I've done the series before, but The other really big, exciting news, which I guess some people know, but I haven't made it public. But I guess I'm making it public right now. All right, ready?
Yeah.
Bambi asked me to compete in September for Miss Coney Island.
Fabulous.
So I'm super excited.
So begins that saga as well, because that is a marathon, as I understand it.
Yes, I have a whole concept for my act, and I'm really excited about it. I'm going to actually, on Friday, May 24th, I'm going to announce the beginning of the process of my act, and that is the morning of the show. Like, I have a whole strategy and whatnot of how I'm creating this act, which I will let people know on the 24th of May. But I haven't yet thought of evening gown or swimsuit.
Right.
But
because for those who don't know, Miss Coney Island is a fabulous pageant show that happens at Burlesque at the Beach, run by Bambi the Mermaid, and it is one of the most important social events of the season. You get to see a lot of really fabulous people. Usually, what is it like? It's usually like 9 or 10 contestants.
Yeah.
Is it that many? Yeah.
I was just on how many? Where to go? It's when I was looking at the email of the folks who Bambi specifically asks you to partake in it.
Yes, you can't just jump in. For those of you who have listened to the Miss Cherry Delight episode of WEBurlesque, the podcast, she goes into it a little bit. You have to earn it.
Yeah. So it's a big honor and in the New York burlesque community, and it's really exciting. And I looked at all the folks that are competing, and there's a lot of friends of mine that are competing. It's a really dope lineup this year, and I'm excited to have that camaraderie and not be like, oh, it's a contest, but just like, oh, we're all doing this really fun, really out there wild show.
Yeah, then that's really what it's meant to be. It's not meant to be some scratching nails and throwing baubles so you fall down the stairs situation. No, it's supposed to be a celebration.
So I'm super excited about that. So those are some.
That's a lot. You got a lot going
on. My calendar going up.
How do you, if you don't mind me asking, how do you feel that wrapping all of that up together with also being a not just a burlesque mom but a mom to a child? How do you keep your head up? Is it just you just need all these plates in the air? Because it seems like you need all these plates in the air. That's
part of it. I think my brain, my dance teacher, one of my dance teachers in undergrad, and she told me this, and I think she told it to me not to be discouraging, but she was trying, I don't know.
Yeah.
She said, if you live to be 500, you're never going to accomplish everything you want to accomplish. And I think she was coming out of the background of the sort of the old school dance training of you focus on this one particular thing and you become a master and that's what you do and that way. And that has never been how my brain works. Mm-hmm. I have always needed to, I think in spirals, I think I said that. The way that it's not multitasking because then you're not, but I work on something for a little while and then I need to go over to this other place and I need to focus on something else. If I try to just do one thing for a long amount of time, I zone out and I can't focus and then I do nothing.
I am exactly the same way. It is is so difficult and it is so irritating and exhausting for so many other people, and I'm sorry, but that's how it works. I understand you want me just to pay attention for that was why I was difficult at school, because I was never able to really give them the full dedication. Did you find that as well?
I mean, it went in stages. I did, I don't know. I mean, high school was easy. Whatever. I did really well in high school for the most part. In college, I think I did good, but I struggled with, where I found that was the writing. Like, I went to Sarah Lawrence, which is very writing heavy, and I'm a really good writer, actually. But my first year, they sent me to the writing tutor because I was having a really hard time. And when he finally got me to write something, he was like expecting it to be crappy because they sent me to him, right? And he looked at me and he was like, "This is really good. Why are you here?" And it's because I was editing in my head before I got anything on paper, so I would just not be able to start. So like it takes me a really long time to write things, and I get really distracted easily. So that's where it manifests for me. And I've discovered if I give myself, I'm only going to focus on this one thing for half an hour instead of trying to pull an all-nighter and not getting done and then beating myself up. Right, I'm going to focus on this for half an hour and write as much as I can. Then I'm going to do a whole bunch of other stuff. And then when I come back to it, I'll be able to think and do another chunk. That's
right. Right. I identify with it so much. And I'm going to try to use that outward spirals motif to explain it, because that actually is that's reality right there.
Yeah.
And I usually feel so bad about myself about it, but it really can be a strength.
You just have to be able to acknowledge it and not, okay. So last little metaphor here.
Sure.
I was, I got diagnosed last year, but whatever, my therapist is not sure. Whatever, with this other therapist. The point is of having ADHD, and that sort of opened up my brain. It was this aha moment where I feel like for most of my schooling, I have been trying to cross this river where the current's really challenging. And everyone else is crossing the river right at this one place. And I keep on getting stuck and it never working. And suddenly this diagnosis made me look up and see that half a mile down the river there was a bridge that I could cross.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like, right, I just need to try a different strategy. It's not that I'm defective or my brain isn't as good or whatever. It's just I need a different strategy to accomplish something that someone else can do this way. And so so having that and stopping beating myself up so much has been really helpful.
I'll work on it.
I'll
do what I can. I mean, it's always going to be a multi-step process.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I thank you for spending some time with me. Before we call it a night and I let you get back to the other million things you got going on today, I want to take a quick moment and have you break down a gentleman in your life known as Don Dick Realis, and I'd like you to explain a little bit about where this persona comes from and what they contribute to your work.
Sure, Mr. Don Dick Realis. Yes, is the brother of MissAuroraBOOBrealis, and I have the ridiculous sort of tagline of, because it's all about genitalia in their family. A little bit ridiculous.
A little anatomy.
And, anatomy and all of that, and yeah. Anyway, I started, well, besides the fourth grade Prince drag, I started doing drag in 2010, I think, when I was living in the UK, and it was specifically, I got asked to perform in a show in Manchester where I was living, a burlesque show, and the theme was the Hollywood casting couch. And I sort of was, I don't want to do a traditional casting couch starlit number. I was like, that's been done. And then I came up with this idea, what if I was the producer? What if I was in drag? And I had a good friend who was this amazing performer, Joey Haitley, from UK, who actually directed my first Drag King piece. And Joey is an incredible trans man performance artist who feels Joey's tagline is the gender joker. And anyway, so Joey directed the piece for me, and it was basically, and I recorded, so the track is like there's this jazz track playing in the background, and then I wrote this script, this dialogue between Mr. Producer and MissAuroraBOOBrealis, and her coming into the office and him being really sleazy, and then ultimately her flipping the script and like taking the power from him. But I am Mr. Producer performing it on stage, so you only see MissAuroraBOOBrealis through my eyes. So it's really like a scene study piece where the audience sees the other person through my eyes. And it's really an acting piece. There's no dance whatsoever in the piece. And that was really amazing to do, this first Drag King number, because as a burlesque performer, another thing that is very different for me as opposed to a lot of different performers is Aurora is not a persona. Aurora really is Dawn. Like, so when I am Aurora on stage, I'm really Dawn on stage, and I feel like that is who I am. I feel most myself on stage. I don't put on a persona as Aurora, but suddenly having this Drag King persona, now I'm getting to play and act. Mr. Don Dick Realis is not me. Like, now I'm playing with issues of toxic masculinity, and I'm playing with all of this other stuff. And it's so freeing and so fun to be able to comment on that through this other persona. And even lately, a couple of months ago, I hosted the Compost Bin one half as Don Dick Realis, and I had to have him speak, and which was a challenge and fun to, keep the, hey, what's up? This is Mr. Don Dick Realis, how you doing? Yeah, what's up? Hey, to keep that register throughout a whole half of show. But also, I started playing with giving him, not making him so one-dimensional. Like, I gave him some more feelings, and I started to have him be like, Aurora's always telling me that, like, I need, she's always attacking me about how, toxic and all. It's like, but I have feelings. And, like, I was starting to, like, as someone who has been a toxic man, to, like, unpack his gentler side and give him more depth and range, which was really fun to do. So
I was talking to Nick's Nocturne a couple of days ago, and we were talking about drag kings and how a lot of times when women particularly take on a drag king persona, and sometimes trans men, but largely women, they go into sort of like hyper masculine in sort of a toxic kind of way, and they get this gait about them, and they suddenly get a little outwardly disrespectful, and sometimes it's fun in games, and then sometimes it's sort of like, but why? But why? And also, again, the interesting thing is, more often than not, those performers are performing either for other women or for non-binary trans people, but not necessarily dudes, or they're behaving a certain way backstage, and it's sort of interesting that we give ourselves that, or that they would, I shouldn't say we, but that folks give themselves that sort of mentality as the default. How do you find that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've made a really conscious effort when I create a piece for Don Dick to make sure that if he is that way, then he gets taken down. that, like, I'm not going to just have him take up all that space and then the end of the piece he's still taking up all that space. Like, I'm going to, if I'm using him in that way, I'm going to have him be taken down a notch or 3, or be humiliated, or transcend and shift his energy or something. But yeah, I've definitely, there was a moment some years ago when I was still newer to performing Don Dick, that during when I was still in BGB, and we were performing at a college, and I was doing a Don Dick piece, and I had this moment where I just got into it, and I went out into the audience, and like I, without consent, I like grabbed this student's like leg, and sort of very sexual. And then as soon as I had done it, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just did that. And after the show, I went up to her and I apologized, and I'm like, I'm really sorry I did that. Are you okay? And I checked in with her, and she was like, I'm fine, but like that moment, and that was some years ago now, really made me be even more hyper aware to make sure that when I'm performing Don Dick, like how I'm using him, and to not get taken away and then just replicate toxic masculinity for itself, because we don't need that. It's everywhere.
Right. And sometimes it's not satire unless you're calling attention to it. Otherwise, you're just embodying it. Yeah.
Exactly. So, and I think it's important to, in general, whether it's whatever you're dealing with as performers, that we acknowledge and can actually talk about when we fuck up sometimes. Be like, oh yeah, I admit that I did this one time. It wasn't cool, and I learned from it, and I'm never going to do that again.
You learned and you did better. Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of people need to, when they do that, they need to step back, realize it, and then say, yeah, I fucked up. Let's not do that again, and, move on. Yeah. For themselves, unless somebody else says, what, more time needs to be spent for you to fix that. But thank you for creating stages for people and making it available to folk. You are a delight to speak to. Thank you for setting some time away to chat with me. I will be seeing you soon, and I'll put in the footnotes all the ways so that people can keep in touch with you and with Brass to see what you've got going on. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure.
All right.
Folks, it's been WEBurlesque, Viktor Devonne with MissAuroraBOOBrealis. Mwah. See you next time.
Mwah. Bye.
Bye.
Generations, our families have stayed at the Gilman, the home away from home that has been standing for 75 years. It was the final vision of our town's industrial leader, Lionel Gilman. Born in 1819 to a devoted mother and father only a few miles from where the hotel now stands, Lionel Gilman made a name for himself with multiple acts of business savvy and early social awareness. Indeed, Mr. Gilman was touted by colleagues as a symbol of strong leadership, a giving heart, and an eye for the future. While Mr. Gilman only lived 2 years after his amazing hotel was open for business, it was through strategic business plans laid out before he died that ensured his building would stand proud for 3/4 of a century.
Viktor Devonne presents Two Nights Stay, Stories from the Gilman.